Wagner has covered this war inch by inch and, so to speak, by means of his shortwave receiving sets. During the invasions, he's frequently worked more than 32 hours at a stretch. He was one of the few observers who stoutly maintained that sooner or later Stalin and Hitler had to fight it out. He rejected the Finnish propaganda and maintained that the Red Army was no pushover for anybody, including Hitler. He was one of the first who predicted Hitler would not cross the English Channel. Hitler would not cross the English Channel. Wagner said in early 1941 that the Germans had taken over Italy, that Italian morale was at riot point, held together that Hitler's occupation troops were already in Italy. After stopping in the spring of 1940, the Chicago Nazis from broadcasting over WHIP in Hammond, Indiana, subsequently being called the loudmouth skunk and agent of international money changers by Berlin, and after stopping the official Nazi radio in Berlin from quoting his column to suit their own ends, Wagner moved his listening post to Tahosa Ranch, 14 miles south of Estes Park, Colorado, where he has been operating ever since. In March 1941, Fred Weber, general manager of the Mutual Broadcasting System, invited Wagner to render an analysis of propaganda weekly over the coast-to-coast network from KFEL in Denver. This was so successful that even President Roosevelt expressed his appreciation through a letter from Stephen Early, as did United States senators and other officials. After the United States entered the war, his broadcasts were resumed twice weekly from KFEL, Denver, and his listening post became the official MBS KFEL listening post. It was then that his work gained great importance because now he was and is practically the only fighting man on the air going after the enemy propaganda the only way it can be done, by listening to it direct and analyzing on the spot as to the origin and purpose. Wagner considers the most vital part of his work the informing of the general public as to trends, policies, and methods of the enemy propaganda. That he analyzes the general war situation is incidental. But whoever has heard him says rightly that he is not to be confused with any other commentators, for his approach to current events, now so uppermost in everybody's mind, is fresh, absolutely unique, and never fails to strike the core of the matter, so that listeners understand the vital issues of this war clearly and undistortedly. Amen. We're getting closer. Pretty soon we're going to do his shows, February to August 1942. Okay, we're on Siegfried Wagner, July 18, 2013. We're going to read the Time magazine article written January 27, 1941. The Hermit of Horse Creek. No man in the United States more persistently scandalizes the name of the Nazis than does Chicago Times columnist who signs himself B.E. Lucas. Berlin, in turn, denounces him as a money changer's agent. It's a typical thing to say for Nazis. Anyone that says the truth, to say, oh, they're just working for the money changers, like in Hollywood, or the Jews that run the world. But his material, which packs a wallop in the Midwest, is derived from a source that even Goebbels should hardly object to, the shortwave propaganda broadcast from Germany. High up in a mountainside near Estes Park, Colorado, Lucas has ensconced himself in a rustic listening post from which 5 times a week he wires his findings to the Times of Chicago. Known in Colorado as the Hermit of Horse Creek, and in Chicago as something of a minor mystery man, Lucas last week agreed to reveal his identity, which he has kept secret since he took the air October of 1939. His name, Siegfried Henry Ernest Wagner, a one-time member of the German Reichstag. His sister Hilda, an intimate of many a Nazi bigwig, is a favorite at the Burg Theater in Vienna. Lucas' identity is probably no news to the Nazis. Wagner at least thinks they know who and where he is and keeps 3 formidable dogs in his hideaway. And he has guns and did whatever he had to do to protect himself. He is no pushover himself. Stocky, arrogant, and tough, he has a career of truculence behind his 42 years. Born of peasant stock in Germany, he entered the army in 1916 with little enthusiasm for either Kaiser or the war. To get out of of the army, he shot one of his superiors. His able military lawyer got him off on the plea of juvenile insanity. And young Siegfried sat out the rest of the war in a lunatic asylum where he met Sigmund Freud, who said, "You know, I know you're not crazy, but I'll tell him you are crazy, just so he could stay alive." As a member of the first Democratic Assembly of the German Republic, Wagner wearied of politics in a couple of years and became a magazine publisher. While he was laid up by an auto accident, a chum double-crossed him out of the publishing business. Thereupon, he lit out for the United States. In 1932, then correspondent for 3 Vienna newspapers, decided to hermit in a cabin near Estes Park, Colorado, where we are right now. There he got a name with park authorities as a prickly fellow. When Hitler announced in January of 1939 that he would swamp the world with propaganda if foreign nations didn't stop sniping at the fatherland, Wagner bought a shortwave set, began to listen to German programs. Soon he evolved the plan of analyzing what he heard, sold the idea to the Chicago Times after World War II broke loose. As a one-man rival of such powerful outfits as listening posts of NBC, CBS, and Princeton University, Wagner has one big advantage. He is up high, 8,415 feet. Princeton is now trying to work out a partnership with him. Wagner understands German, English, Deutsch, Danish, Norwegian, Afrikaans, and French. He boasts that he told his readers all through 1940 that there would be no invasion of England, is now trying to convince them that Great Britain will inevitably win the war, which they did. Irritated by English propaganda before Dunkirk, he says it has been improving ever since ranking in accuracy next to the United States News Service. Nazi propaganda he now regards as hopelessly fallacious. Married since 1935 to the art supervisor of Chicago Board of Education, Wagner sees his wife only in the summer when she visits him in Estes Park. He has a fine contempt for genealogical hoopla. A few years ago, Sister Helda clambered up the family tree and was gratified to discover no Jewish blood, and was annoyed to find 2 illegitimate grandparents. Not at all annoyed was brother Siegfried. "They're authentic bastards," he points out, which is more than you can say for the Nazis. So that's the Time magazine. Now this one is the True magazine. True magazine from 1941, July. And the guy that wrote the paper, or wrote the article, drove up to visit him and tells a story of what he found. So let's find out a lot more about Siegfried, the mysterious hermit of Horse Creek, in True magazine, 1941. By Lionel White, an interview with Siegfried Wagner. Until now, no one has known much about Siegfried Wagner. Never before has his full story been told. His very name until recently has been a very closely guarded secret. Protected by 3 vicious police dogs and a heavy revolver, an automatic rifle, and a bodyguard, Wagner sits in a lonely shack on the Continental Divide and performs a strange but remarkable work. There's good reason for his caution. Siegfried Wagner is engaged in a battle with Hitler. And it is Siegfried Wagner whom the Nazis hate more than they hate any other American. So the Nazis hate the man that gave my grandma the property more than any other American. For 18 hours a day, he listens to shortwave broadcasts from Europe and the rest of the world, using his knowledge of 7 languages to interpret what he hears. Once each day, he makes a complete analysis of the news and forwards it to the FBI, Defense Operations Bureau of the FCC, and the United States Department of Information, a division of the International Communications. He provides news analysis for the Chicago Times and other newspapers. Several attempts have been made on his life. It is a known fact that Nazi agents would be delighted to see him over the sights of a gun, but they won't as long as Wagner and his bodyguard Barney Coleham can help it. The editor of True assigned writer Lionel White to drive from New York City to Denver, Colorado, and interview this fascinating personality. It wasn't an easy assignment, as some of White's telegraphic reports testified. One read, "We'll see SW tomorrow if I can get through the snow. Cabin almost impossible to reach." White later reported, Half frozen, but have the story. SW, a wonderful guy. You'll get the story if the snow doesn't get me. White got the story. Here it is. And that's from the editor. Copyright 1941, Country Press Incorporated, Mysterious Hermit of Horse Creek. The Fightin' Hermit. Siegfried, surrounded by thousands of dollars of radio equipment, sits in a lonely cabin on the Continental Divide and analyzes Hitler's propaganda as he is shown above, seated at his desk, revolver in hand. The barrels of 2 rifles can be seen behind the chair. In a large photo at the top, he tunes on a foreign shortwave radio station. Okay, this is about his lonely station. Visitors are not welcome at Wagner's listening post. Everyone who comes up the mountain is watched carefully, challenged at gunpoint. These precautions are Wagner's answer to the threats on his life. The photos at the left and above reveal vividly the loneliness of the station. One of Wagner's dogs may be seen at the photo on the left. So I don't know if you can see these or not. These are the photos. Alright, now for the article. They said in Denver that they didn't believe that I could get a car all the way up the pass. Later, after throbbing of the motor told me I was around 8,000 feet, I hit the great winds of the Continental Divide. They were driving blinding white snow before them. I took the South Fork at St. Vrain up through the canyon for 30 miles. It was no time before I had to stop and put on the chains. I made Allen's Park after 3 stops, during which I had to get out and shovel through the drifts. The woman in the post office told me I could find him some 10 miles up the road. So this is the editor, or this is Lionel White going up there. The woman in the post office told me I could find him some 10 miles up the road. I'd know his shack easily. It had a slender steel wind machine tower and an antenna in the front of it. And there would be the dogs. Again, I was warned that I probably couldn't get through, and I was advised to take snowshoes in case I got stuck in a drift. If you're not used to the thin air and the cold, she said, you can get in a lot of trouble. I thanked her, took along the snowshoes, and pushed on. It was high noon, and the snow was coming down from the northwest and had reached blizzard proportions. It was difficult for me to breathe, and I felt alternatively exhilarated and tired. I watched the speedometer to judge the distance I traveled and kept the car in low gear. Once or twice I slowed dangerously around narrow curves where the road fell away for hundreds of feet. After 6 miles I saw a large log and stone house just off to the left. There was smoke coming up from the chimney. The man must have heard my engine. He stood there with a rifle in the crook of his arm. He had on a ski cap and a leather jacket and waited just inside the half-open door. I could see he was watching my car closely. He must have spotted the New York license plates. He had been expecting me, I guess, because he waved on and I drove on. That would be Colanahan, Wagner's bodyguard. I had heard about him in Denver. 3 miles farther, and I was forced to stop the car and take to the snowshoes. It wouldn't be long now, I knew. And then, after an hour's heavy travel through the drifts, I saw the cabin. Wagner was waiting for me in the doorway. He was taking no chances. A gun was strapped to his side, and there was a rifle lying across a wooden bench on the porch. 3 huge black German police dogs lay at his feet and growled in their throats. I was about to introduce myself to Siegfried Wagner, one-time member of the German Reichstag and today Adolf Hitler's most hated enemy in the United States. He is the man who, for 9 years, has made a war on the airwaves with his homeland from the highest point on the Great Continental Divide. I'd already learned a few things about this fabulous man, and although he has shrouded his life in mystery and is known even to the few old-timers in the Rocky Mountain National Park as the Hermit of Horse Creek, of late, a little has come out about him. And now, from this article, we're going to learn a lot. I knew, for instance, that for 18 hours a day, each day, he sat in his tiny listening post and heard shortwave broadcasts from Europe and around the world. Now we have the internet.